The low hum of the auction hall echoed in the dimly lit space. Hundreds of ships, their hulls battered and worn, lined the rows like forgotten relics. Rusted ships from distant planets, abandoned after the owners had either perished or fled the relentless wars of space. Most were little more than metal skeletons, stripped of any valuable technology, just the kind of scrap Jack's Harrow needed for his business. Jax ran a salvage operation on the edge of the galaxy, and after a series of bad deals and failed attempts to secure decent cargo, his prospects had begun to dwindle. A small, barely recognizable shipyard was all he had left, and he was desperate. His pockets were empty, but his pride, though frayed, still clung to the belief that there was a deal to be made somewhere in the rusted ships that filled this auction hall. He leaned against a cracked pillar, arms folded, eyes scanning the rows of damaged vessels. Nothing stood out to him until, near the back of the lot, something did. A hulking structure caught his eye, the shadows hiding most of its shape. It was unlike any ship he'd ever seen, its design sleek and sophisticated, alien in every way. Even in its dilapidated state, it radiated an aura of untold power. The auctioneer's voice boomed through the hall, announcing the start of the bidding for what seemed like the last vessel of the day. Next up, a relic from the Forgotten Age. A rare starcruiser of unknown origin. Not much is known about it, but it's intact, structurally sound, and waiting for someone who knows how to bring it back to life. Starting bid. 1 credit. Jax's heart skipped a beat. 1 credit? He couldn't believe his ears. The other bidders, a mix of scavengers and shady individuals, seemed disinterested. They murmured among themselves, shaking their heads. They were probably just as puzzled by the ship's mysterious origin as Jax was. But there was something about it, something that spoke to him. Perhaps it was his instinct as a salvage operator, or maybe it was desperation. Whatever it was, Jax didn't hesitate. He raised his hand. 200 credits, Jax called out, the words escaping before he could stop himself. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Most of the others didn't even bother to counter. The ship's unknown origin and the risk of hidden damages made it a liability to most. But Jax wasn't like them. He'd made his living off of ships like this. With a little work, he could turn this wreck into something valuable. To his surprise, no one else bid. The auctioneer's voice cut through the tension. Sold to the man in the back. 200 credits. Jax's breath caught in his throat as he walked to the front, handing over his hard-earned credits. He wasn't sure whether he was making a huge mistake or if this was the lucky break he needed. The auctioneer handed him a set of keys, and with a curt nod, he was left to retrieve his prize. The ship was waiting for him at the back of the hall, tucked behind a pile of junked parts. Jax could feel the weight of his decision pressing on him as he approached. There it stood, half destroyed, with long, jagged cuts across its hull. The markings were unlike anything he recognized. Alien. There was no other way to describe it. The curves of the ship's design were smooth and flowing, not the angular shapes typical of human-made vessels. He climbed into the ship's cockpit, his hands shaking slightly as he gripped the controls. It took some effort to get the engines online, but after a few minutes, the ship hummed to life with a gentle vibration beneath his feet. Once in the air, Jax couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment, mixed with trepidation. He'd just bought a strange, possibly dangerous ship for a pittance. It was a gamble, but in his line of work, that was nothing new. He plotted a course for his shipyard, but as the ship moved through the stars, something strange happened. The ship's hull seemed to pulse, faintly at first, as if reacting to something unseen. Jax frowned. He checked the readings, nothing abnormal. But that strange sensation lingered. He shrugged it off. He had more pressing concerns. It wasn't until he entered the storage hold, looking for spare parts and assessing the damage, that he found it. A compartment he hadn't noticed before. The door was slightly ajar, hidden behind a stack of debris. He felt a sense of unease wash over him as he approached. He opened it, cautiously, revealing a dark, musty cargo hold. There, slumped against the wall, was a figure. Jax's heart raced. At first, he thought it was just another part of the wreckage, perhaps a damaged mannequin or an old piece of technology. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he realized it wasn't anything like that. It was a person. A woman. She was unconscious, her skin a pale blue that shimmered faintly in the darkness. Silver markings covered her arms, her face, intricate patterns that seemed almost alive. Her hair, long and flowing, shimmered with an ethereal glow, silver and white strands intertwined, moving ever so slightly in the still air of the hold. Jax's breath caught in his throat. He had no idea who or what she was, but instinctively, he knew she was important, and she needed help. He knelt beside her, checking for a pulse. There was a faint beat under her skin, a sign that she was alive. His mind raced. How had she gotten here? Why was she hidden in this wrecked ship? His gut told him one thing. This wasn't just some accident. This girl, no, this woman was a key to something much bigger. He gently lifted her into his arms, his thoughts whirling with questions he couldn't answer. As he carried her back to the cockpit, he noticed something odd. Embedded into the back of her neck, almost invisible beneath the shimmer of her skin, was a small metallic device, a marker. He didn't know what it meant, but he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary salvage, and he had no idea what he was getting himself into. Jax settled the alien woman gently into the co-pilot seat, adjusting the harness to ensure she wouldn't slip out during the flight. His heart pounded with uncertainty as he returned to the pilot's seat, his mind racing with questions. Who was she? What was she doing aboard this broken-down ship? And what the hell was that device in the back of her neck? The ship hummed around him, its engines purring quietly as the stars streaked past. He was still headed toward his shipyard, but the quiet seemed almost too peaceful for what had just transpired. His fingers drummed nervously on the console as he glanced at the unconscious woman from time to time, watching her closely. He'd seen plenty of odd things in his career, but this was different. After an hour of tense silence, Jax heard a small groan from the seat beside him. He snapped his attention back to the woman, his breath catching as her eyes fluttered open. For a moment, she just stared at him, her wide eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. Her pupils were a vibrant shade of violet, reflecting the soft glow of the ship's control panels. Jax held his breath, unsure of how she would react. Would she scream? Attack him? The alien woman blinked a few times, disoriented, then spoke, her voice soft and faintly musical. Where am I? Jax exhaled a relieved breath, leaning back slightly in his seat. You're safe for now, he said, trying to keep his tone calm. You've been unconscious for a while. You're on my ship. I'm taking you to my shipyard. She blinked again, the words seeming to puzzle her. Shipyard. Her voice was barely a whisper, like she was struggling to remember something. No, this isn't where I belong. Jax raised an eyebrow. Well, I'm not exactly sure where you do belong, but you're here now. I found you in the hold of this ship, unconscious and tied up. He hesitated. I don't know who you are, but you're important, aren't you? The woman's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, Jax saw a flicker of recognition. I am Lyra, she said, her voice gaining strength. Of the Stellari people. I was lost. Stellari people? Jax's brow furrowed. He'd never heard of them. There were countless alien species in the galaxy, some well-known, others completely unknown. But the name Stellari didn't ring any bells. Lyra took a deep breath, rubbing her forehead as if trying to shake off the fog that clouded her mind. The Stellari were once a great and advanced race. She stopped herself as if trying to form the right words. We were hunted. We lost everything. Jax listened closely. Despite her ragged state, there was an undeniable intensity to her voice, a sense of power buried deep within her that hadn't faded, even after all she'd been through. Something about her story resonated within him, as if it echoed through the stars themselves. Who hunted you? Jax asked. His curiosity was piqued, but he also needed to know if she was in any immediate danger. The Dominion, she said, her voice cold with hatred. They are the ones who tore my people apart. We were powerful, but they sought to control us, to use our knowledge for their own gain. Lyra's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white. And now they will stop at nothing to finish what they started. Jax's stomach tightened. The Dominion. He had heard rumors of such an empire, one known for their ruthless conquests, wiping out entire civilizations to claim their resources. But hearing it from Lyra, seeing the raw emotion in her eyes as she spoke, made it all feel real and dangerous. "Why were you on this ship?" Jax asked. "And what's that device on the back of your neck?" Lyra's eyes went to the device, her expression darkening. "It's a tracking implant, one of many that the Dominion uses to monitor and control their prisoners." Her hand instinctively reached up to touch the implant, but she quickly pulled it away. "I was captured by them. They experimented on me, tried to break my will and extract what knowledge I had about our technology." She looked down, her shoulders slumping slightly. "But I escaped. Just barely." Jax's mind reeled. She had been experimented on, and she was from a race capable of technology so advanced that it could be considered a weapon. "I don't know how you ended up on this ship," Jax muttered, more to himself than to her. "But it seems like fate brought us together." Lyra met his gaze, her expression fierce. "Fate is something I no longer believe in. But if you're asking why you found me, it's because I have something they want." Jax's heart skipped a beat. "What do you mean?" She paused, as if weighing how much to reveal. Her gaze locked onto him, her violet eyes filled with a mix of trust and wariness. "The ship you found me on, it's not just any ship. It's a key to an ancient weapon, a technology that the Dominion has been hunting for centuries. My people built it, and now they believe I am the only one who can unlock it." Jax's mind raced. A weapon? A powerful alien weapon? His initial thought was one of awe, but then the gravity of the situation hit him. If the Dominion were after her, it wasn't just her life in danger. It was the entire galaxy's. He shook his head, trying to grasp the enormity of it all. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" Lyra's face softened for a moment, a flicker of vulnerability breaking through her hardened exterior. "Yes, but I will fight to the end to stop them. I must. I cannot let them claim what's not theirs." Jax felt a strange stirring inside him, something he hadn't felt in years, a sense of purpose. He had always lived his life by survival, by doing what was necessary to scrape by. But now, with Lyra's words echoing in his mind, he realized he was caught in something far larger than he had ever anticipated. "This weapon you're talking about," Jax said, his voice steady, "how do we stop them from getting it?" Lyra's eyes glinted with resolve. "We have to reach it first. The Stellari shipyard. It's hidden, but I know how to find it. Together we can end this before they do." Jax swallowed hard, a mixture of uncertainty and determination flooding his veins. This was no longer just a salvage job. He wasn't just trying to fix a broken ship. He was part of something much bigger now, and whether he was ready or not, it seemed the galaxy had its eyes on him. He nodded, feeling the weight of the decision settle over him. "Then let's find this shipyard." The ship surged forward, its engines roaring to life as Jax punched in the coordinates for his shipyard. The stars streaked past at faster-than-light speed, but in his mind, the journey felt much slower. His thoughts were consumed by Lyra's words. The Stellari, an ancient and advanced race, the Dominion's pursuit of her, and, by extension, him now that she was on his ship. He knew trouble was inevitable, but the magnitude of what was unfolding still hadn't fully hit him. His mind kept returning to the key she spoke of, and what it could mean for the galaxy. Lyra sat beside him in the co-pilot seat, her expression grim as she gazed out at the shifting stars. Despite her earlier strength, Jax could see the lingering fear in her eyes. She was caught between the urgency of their mission and the trauma of what she had endured. The tracking device implanted in her neck was a constant reminder of the Dominion's control, and Jax couldn't shake the feeling that danger was closing in on them. As they neared the shipyard, Jax glanced over at her. "You sure you're ready for this? I don't exactly have much here, just some old salvage. It's not the safest place for a battle." She met his gaze, a flicker of determination crossing her face. "I've been through worse than you could imagine. I'll be fine. But we need to keep moving. The Dominion will be watching." Just then, an alert flashed across the control panel. A radar blip, followed by another. Jax's heart skipped a beat. "Can you get a visual?" he asked, his fingers already tapping on the console to adjust the ship's course. Lyra's hand hovered over the sensor, her eyes narrowing. "They're close," she muttered. "Too close. Bounty hunters." Jax cursed under his breath. He'd hoped to make it to the shipyard undetected, but it seemed the Dominion wasn't about to let them go that easily. The radar blips grew closer, and soon, the unmistakable shape of a ship emerged from the darkness of space. Sleek, predatory, and menacing. "They've found us." Lyra's voice was low, her tone flat. "They won't stop until they capture me." Jax's grip tightened on the controls. "Then we'll make sure they don't get the chance." He tapped a button on the panel, engaging the ship's emergency weapon systems. Lyra watched him, a fleeting smile tugging at the corners of her lips. "You're not the first human to try and fight the Dominion, but maybe you'll be the first to survive." Before Jax could respond, the ship lurched, and an alarm blared in his ear. The bounty hunters had already opened fire. Plasma. Bolts shot across the distance, narrowly missing the hull as Jax banked hard to the left. The ship's shield flickered with each impact, its energy draining fast. "Hold on!" Jax shouted, his hands flying over the controls. He activated the ship's cloaking device, the external lights dimming as the vessel became nearly invisible against the black backdrop of space. Lyra's eyes widened. "You can cloak this ship?" "I can now," Jax replied, his voice tight with concentration. He wasn't sure how long the cloak would hold, but it was their best chance to evade the incoming fire. The ship's systems whined under the strain as they veered through asteroids, the ship's cloaked form darting between rocky debris. The bounty hunters, unable to track their target directly, fired blindly into the dark void. Their shots were getting closer, but Jax could feel the ship's power reserve depleting. The cloaking technology wasn't built for extended use, and he knew it wouldn't last much longer. Lyra reached for a console on her side, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "There's a small nebula up ahead. If we make it there, the interference will scramble their sensors. We can hide in its clouds." Jax nodded. "Lead the way." He adjusted their trajectory, aiming for the nebula that loomed like a dense fog in the distance. The ship shook with every blast, the hull groaning in protest. He wasn't sure how much longer it could take the pounding, but the nebula was their only chance. "We've got a few more seconds before they catch up," Lyra said, urgency in her voice. "Do you trust me?" Jax glanced over at her. Her face was hard, focused. "I'm not sure I trust anyone right now," he admitted. "But if you've got a plan, I'm listening." Without another word, Lyra tapped a few commands into her console, and suddenly, the ship's engines roared to life. A burst of power surged through the cloaking device, pushing the ship toward the nebula faster than Jax had anticipated. The ship rocketed forward, a trail of fire in their wake. "Hold on!" Jax shouted as the ship entered the nebula, the ship's sensors flickering and going haywire as they passed through the dense, colorful clouds. Outside, the nebula shimmered in hues of violet and deep red, the gases twisting in chaotic patterns. The bounty hunters, now completely blind to their location, shot past them in hot pursuit, their vessels failing to pick up even a trace of the cloaked ship. For a brief moment, Jax thought they had escaped. But then, a low rumble shook the cockpit. "What was that?" Jax asked, his voice laced with concern. Lyra's eyes narrowed as she scanned the sensors. "It's a tracker. They've marked us." Jax swore under his breath. The Dominion wasn't going to give up so easily. He knew they would keep coming, no matter how much distance they gained. "We need to find a way to disable that tracker," Jax muttered, his hand already moving toward the ship's weapons panel. "That's not going to be enough," Lyra said, her voice firm. "We need to get to the Stellari shipyard. Only there can we access the technology to completely disable their pursuit. The tracker will lead them straight to us, but if we reach the shipyard before they can catch up, we might stand a chance. Jax glanced at her, his grip tight on the controls. They were headed toward the unknown now, pursued by deadly enemies with no easy way out. But there was one thing he was sure of. There was no going back. "Then that's where we're going," he said, his voice filled with resolve. "Let's get you home, Lyra. For both our sakes." With one last glance at the stars ahead, Jax pushed the throttle forward, steering them deeper into the nebula, hoping the darkness would buy them just enough time to make it to safety. The nebula enveloped them like a massive, swirling cloud of color and chaos. Jagged, shifting tendrils of gas and plasma curled around the ship as Jax piloted them deeper into the cloud, the ship's systems dimming as they fought to stay functional in the intense interference. The cloaking system flickered dangerously, unable to maintain its full invisibility, but it was still enough to keep the pursuing bounty hunters from locking onto their position. Jax gritted his teeth, his fingers tight around the controls. The ship rattled with every turn, every shift of the nebula's volatile forces. He didn't know how long they could keep this up. The nebula was a maze, a labyrinth of shifting clouds and particles that distorted all radar and scanners. But it was also a deadly place, where any misstep could lead to destruction. "How much farther?" Jax asked, his voice tight with urgency. Lyra was hunched over her own console, her violet eyes glowing faintly as she scanned for any sign of the Stellari shipyard. "Not far. But the closer we get, the more dangerous it becomes. The Dominion knows this area better than we do. They'll send in reinforcements soon." Jax didn't need any more warnings. He pushed the ship into a sharp turn, narrowly avoiding a chunk of debris that had floated into their path. The ship groaned, the hull straining against the stress of the evasive maneuver. "What exactly is this shipyard you're talking about?" Jax asked, glancing at Lyra as he guided them through the cloud. "Is it a planet? A station?" Lyra's fingers moved quickly over the panel, her mind clearly elsewhere as she concentrated. "It's not a planet or a station, not in the way you'd understand. The Stellari didn't build typical structures. They constructed a living shipyard. It's a massive, bioengineered facility, buried beneath the layers of a dead star. We'll need to access the core energy matrix to unlock its defenses." Jax blinked. A living shipyard? His mind struggled to comprehend the concept. "You're telling me this place is organic?" "Yes," Lyra confirmed, her expression focused. "It's an extension of our people's connection to the stars. Only those with Stellari blood can activate it. That's why the Dominion is so desperate to capture me. They believe I hold the key to unlocking it. But they don't understand it the way I do." Jax's thoughts raced. A living shipyard, hidden within a dead star, activated by ancient technology? It sounded like something straight out of a legend. But if it was real, and if they could get to it before the Dominion did, it might be their only hope. "How long until we reach it?" Jax asked, pushing the ship harder as they plunged deeper into the nebula. He could feel the pressure mounting, the tight space growing smaller with every twist and turn. Lyra's hands moved with deft precision, tapping coordinates into the console. "We're close. But the nebula's interference is making it difficult to get a clear reading. The Dominion could be tracking us now by the heat signature of the ship. We need to lose them before they can pinpoint our location." Jax nodded, taking a sharp left turn to avoid a large mass of ionized gas that suddenly flared in front of them. His heart pounded in his chest as the ship shuddered under the strain. "We can't outrun them forever. We have to take a risk." Lyra's expression hardened. "What do you have in mind?" Jax's fingers flew over the console, punching in a series of commands. He powered up the ship's auxiliary engines, increasing the ship's speed as he shot them through a narrow gap in the nebula, a path he'd spotted just moments before. The ship barreled toward it, the thick clouds parting like a veil before them. But as they raced through, a loud crack sounded from behind them. "The Dominion's closing in," Lyra shouted, her voice strained. "They've found us." A moment later, the first barrage of plasma fire streaked through the nebula, missing them by mere inches as Jax swerved to the side. The ship groaned again, a warning sign that the shields were beginning to weaken. "We can't keep dodging them forever," Jax said. his voice tight with determination. He glanced at Lyra. You said the shipyard is hidden beneath a dead star, right? How do we access it? Lyra's gaze shifted from the console to the view ahead. We need to align the ship's energy output with the coordinates embedded in my DNA. It will unlock a path to the shipyard, but only if we're in the right position. We must enter the star's gravity well to open the access point. Jax's mind raced. The shipyard was beneath a dead star? That meant they would have to dive deep into a star's dying core to access the facility? The thought alone made his skin crawl. But there was no choice. Then we're going in, he said firmly. The bounty hunters were closing in, and Jax knew that time was running out. He slammed the throttle to its maximum setting, pushing the ship into overdrive as they plunged toward the core of the dead star. The ship's engines howled, the energy output soaring as the ship entered the intense gravity of the star, pulling them toward its heart. Lyra's voice, now cold with urgency, echoed through the cockpit. Get ready. The moment we enter the gravity well, the Dominion will know exactly where we are. We'll have only a few seconds to access the shipyard. Jax gritted his teeth, his focus unwavering. The ship strained under the gravitational forces as they hurtled toward the star. Outside, the nebulous cloud of gas thinned as they neared the heart of the dead star, revealing the swirling remnants of a once-active celestial body. The stars beyond were mere pinpricks of light as the dark mass of the star's core loomed ahead, a massive, glowing vortex of radiation and energy. As they reached the threshold of the gravity well, the ship groaned again, the power reserves draining quickly. Jax pushed the controls to their limits, but the ship was already beginning to slow, the strain of the journey beginning to take its toll. He could feel it. The Dominion was closing in on them, their ships entering the gravitational pull of the star behind them. Lyra now! Jax shouted. Unlock the access point. Lyra's hands moved with lightning speed over the console, her voice a whisper of ancient words as she activated the hidden mechanisms embedded in her DNA. The ship hummed, and for a moment Jax thought they might have made it. Then, without warning, the star erupted into blinding light, and a massive shockwave shook the ship. The Dominion was almost upon them, but Lyra had done it. They were in, and the shipyard was within their grasp. The ship lurched violently as the shockwave from the star's explosion hit them. The massive pulse of energy swept through the nebula, scattering the gas clouds in every direction. The sudden turbulence rattled the ship, and Jax felt the hull groaning beneath them, struggling to hold together under the strain of the intense forces. He gritted his teeth, pulling hard on the controls to keep the ship from spiraling out of control. We're in, Lyra's voice was strained, but there was a note of triumph in it. The shipyard is opening. Jax glanced at her, trying to steady the ship with one hand while keeping an eye on the readouts. You're sure about this? I don't know how much more this ship can handle. The star's core is stabilizing now. We're safe for the moment. She looked at him, her violet eyes shimmering in the dim cockpit light. But we need to hurry. The Dominion will detect the access point we just unlocked. We'll have mere minutes before they can locate us. He nodded, biting back the panic that threatened to rise in his chest. The Dominion's relentless pursuit, the unknown shipyard, the strange weapon that Lyra's people had left behind. It was all coming to a head. This was the moment. The shipyard, if it was real, might hold the key to not just their survival but to the future of the galaxy itself. Jax threw the throttle forward, pushing the ship deeper into the star's gravitational pull. The core of the dead star was a swirling vortex of raw energy, twisting and contorting like a wound-up spring. It was hard to tell which way was up, as the ship's sensors malfunctioned under the pressure, their readings distorted by the energy radiating from the star. Lyra's hands were a blur over the console, guiding the ship with uncanny precision through the turbulence. The access point wasn't a physical structure they could see. It was a complex resonance embedded in the energy field that surrounded the star's core, a pattern that only Lyra could recognize and unlock. She muttered under her breath as she adjusted the ship's energy levels, her mind seemingly in tune with the fluctuations of the star itself. "I've located the door," she said, her voice low with concentration. "It's a dimensional rift, hidden in the core's energy. If we can pass through it, we'll reach the shipyard's outer perimeter. Jax didn't hesitate. He punched in the coordinates she had given him, aligning the ship's course with the swirling rift she had activated. The ship trembled as it approached, the gravity well pulling them closer and closer to the heart of the star. It was almost impossible to see the rift. It was as if the fabric of space itself had bent and twisted in a way that defied understanding. A shimmer in the air, just a slight distortion in the fabric of reality. "Get ready," Lyra said, her tone grave. "Once we pass through, we'll be entering an entirely different space. The shipyard exists outside of normal dimensions. We'll be in a place where time and space don't function the way they do here." "Sounds comforting," Jax muttered. His fingers tightened on the controls, bracing for whatever lay beyond the rift. He had no idea what to expect, but he had no choice now but to trust Lyra. Her calm confidence was the only thing keeping him from panicking as the ship continued its descent toward the unstable core. The ship passed through the rift in a flash of blinding light. For a moment, everything around them seemed to distort. Space stretched and warped, stars becoming streaks of light, the nebula twisting into swirling shapes. It felt like they were being torn apart and stitched back together all at once, the ship shuddering under the pressure. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the distortion stopped. Jax blinked as his eyes adjusted. The cockpit was now bathed in a soft, ethereal glow. They were no longer in the star's core. Instead, they floated in a vast, open space that seemed to stretch on forever. But it wasn't empty. All around them, enormous structures rose up, twisting in organic, almost sentient patterns. The shipyard, though it defied the laws of physics and design Jax knew, was alive with movement. Massive energy fields hummed through the space, pulsing like the beating of a heart. The structures were like gigantic, bioluminescent trees, their branches intertwining and forming vast, intricate networks. "This is it," Lyra breathed, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. "The Stellari shipyard is alive." Jax had never seen anything like it. The sight was both breathtaking and terrifying. It was clear that the Stellari were not just technologically advanced, but that their entire civilization was connected to the stars in ways that defied human comprehension. The shipyard was like a living organism, its massive structures shifting slowly, constantly evolving, as if they were part of some larger, incomprehensible plan. "We have to go deeper," Lyra said, snapping Jax back to the task at hand. "There's a central nexus where the main control is located. If we reach it, I can access the heart of the shipyard. From there, I can activate its defenses, disable the tracking devices on me, and unlock the weapon that the Dominion is after." Jax nodded, not needing to be told twice. He guided the ship forward, careful to avoid the massive, twisting branches of the shipyard structures that stretched across the space. It felt like they were being watched, as though the shipyard itself was aware of their presence. A series of flashing lights appeared on the ship's sensors, and Lyra tensed beside him. "They're here," she said, her voice tight. "The Dominion has arrived." Jax's pulse quickened as the shipyard's massive forms flickered in and out of visibility on the sensor grid. The Dominion's ships had followed them through the rift, and they were now closing in on the access point. "We don't have much time," Jax said, his voice grim. "We need to get to the central nexus before they do." Lyra's fingers flew over the console again. "I can't stop them from coming in, but we can slow them down. We need to find a way to seal off the entrance to the shipyard. The moment the Dominion realizes what's here, they'll come at us with everything they have." Jax swallowed hard, his mind racing. "We'll have to fight them off, won't we?" Lyra nodded, her expression fierce. "We will. But if we can access the shipyard's core, we'll have a chance. This place will protect us. It's been waiting for the right person to come back. And I intend to make sure the Dominion never gets their hands on what's here." Jax stared at the distant horizon of the shipyard, the looming shapes of the Dominion's ships now visible on the periphery of his vision. A wave of cold determination washed over him. There was no turning back now. "Then let's make sure they don't," he said. "Prepare for a fight. The atmosphere inside the shipyard felt thick with tension as Jax piloted the vessel deeper into the heart of the living structures. The air hummed with energy, pulsing like the beat of a giant, unseen heart. The massive bioluminescent forms that made up the shipyard skeleton seemed to shift around them, responding to their presence in ways that defied logic. The ship itself vibrated as if it, too, recognized the importance of this moment. Behind them, the black void of space stretched out, interrupted only by the sharp silhouettes of the Dominion's ships emerging from the rift. They were close, too close. The ships had entered the shipyard's boundary, and though the massive organic walls of the yard provided some cover, Jax knew it wouldn't be enough to hide them for long. The Dominion would hunt them down the moment they sensed the power hidden within the shipyard. "We need to get to the core." Now, Lyra said, her voice urgent but controlled. Her hand gripped the armrest beside her, her eyes locked on the growing shadows of the Dominion ships. They were getting closer. Jax nodded, his fingers flying over the controls. The ship responded sluggishly, the interference from the shipyard's living systems making navigation a challenge. Every movement felt unnatural, as if the ship itself were resisting the course he tried to set. But the only way forward was deeper into the shipyard's center, toward the nexus where Lyra could activate the shipyard's defenses. The central nexus was located within a massive structure, a sprawling, tree-like network of interwoven metal and organic material, taller than any building Jax had ever seen. Its roots spread out beneath the star's gravity well, feeding directly into the dead star's core. Above, the twisting branches reached high, glowing with the energy of the star, casting an eerie light that illuminated the otherwise dark and chaotic battlefield. "We're almost there," Lyra said, a trace of worry creeping into her voice. "Once we're within range of the core, I can access the control system. But we'll be vulnerable. The Dominion won't give us a second to breathe." Jax felt the weight of her words like a physical force. The Dominion had their sights on the shipyard now. He knew their priority would be to capture Lyra. She was the key to everything here, and they would stop at nothing to force her to activate whatever weapon lay hidden in the shipyard's depths. A blast rocked the ship as the first volley of plasma fire ripped through the organic walls of the shipyard. Jax gritted his teeth, throwing the ship into a hard evasive maneuver, narrowly avoiding another blast that would have torn through the hull. The ship groaned in protest as it strained to respond, its shields flickering with each impact. "Hang on!" Jax shouted, swerving the ship to the side as another barrage followed. The enemy ships were closing in, their weapons locking onto the ship's energy signature. "They're cutting us off," Lyra cried, looking out of the viewport. The Dominion ships were everywhere now, surrounding the shipyard's entrance, cutting off all escape routes. "We can't outrun them," Jax muttered, his fingers pressing against the console with urgency. "We'll need to make a stand." Lyra nodded grimly. "There's no other choice." The shipyard's massive structures seemed to pulse in rhythm with the approaching danger, almost as if it were alive, aware of the threat bearing down on them. Then, as if responding to Lyra's will, a bright flash of light erupted from the shipyard's core, and a wave of energy surged outward, pushing back against the Dominion ships. The energy field didn't damage the ships, but it slowed them down, buying them just a little more time. Jax took advantage of the opening, barreling toward the nexus. His hands flew over the controls, steering the ship with everything he had, as the walls of the shipyard seemed to close in around them. The core was just ahead, a swirling vortex of energy and light. "We're almost there," Lyra said, her eyes narrowing in concentration. "I'm accessing the controls now." Jax watched the readouts as the shipyard systems came online, the lights inside the ship flickering as power surged through the walls. But the Dominion wasn't going to let them reach the nexus without a fight. Several ships had broken free from the energy wave, and now they were closing in fast. "They've got us surrounded," Jax said, his voice tight. "Can you activate the defenses yet?" Lyra's fingers danced across the console as she connected to the shipyard's control systems. "I'm trying, but I need more time. They're jamming my access. If I don't get through soon, we'll be overwhelmed." Jax cursed under his breath, knowing the clock was ticking. They had moments, maybe seconds, before the Dominion's superior firepower would tear them apart. With a grimace, Jax slammed the ship's auxiliary weapons systems online. The ship shuddered as the energy cannons hummed to life, firing a barrage of plasma and ion beams at the approaching ships. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it slowed the enemy down, pushing them back just long enough for Lyra to finish her task. "Lyra, we need those defenses now," Jax shouted, watching the incoming fire that illuminated the ship's interior with each impact. "I'm almost there," she replied, her face tense with concentration. "Just hold on for a few more seconds." Jax's heart raced. Every shot that hit the ship sent a jolt through his body, and the hull was beginning to crack under the pressure. The shields were all but gone, and they were barely holding it together. Just as another wave of plasma fire slammed into them, the shipyard's systems came to life with a deafening roar. A massive energy barrier erupted around the ship, a shimmering shield that radiated outward, enveloping them in a dome of protection. The incoming fire bounced off the shield, harmlessly dissipating into space. For a moment, the ship was safe, cocooned in the heart of the shipyard's power. Lyra exhaled in relief, slumping back into her seat. "It's done. The defenses are active. The Dominion won't be able to get through that shield. For now, we're safe." Jax let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The shipyard had done what they needed it to do. The Dominion's ships had been forced to retreat, unable to breach the powerful energy field. But Jax knew this was only a temporary victory. The Dominion would regroup. They would come back with everything they had. "We've bought ourselves some time," Jax said, his voice steady now, despite the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. "But this isn't over. We need to find out what's hidden in this place, what the Dominion is really after." Lyra nodded, her gaze shifting to the glowing core of the shipyard. "Yes, but now we can explore it in safety. The weapon that the Dominion wants. It's here, Jax, and it's our only hope to turn the tide." Jax looked out into the vast living landscape of the Stellari shipyard. He knew the final battle was far from over, but with Lyra's knowledge and the shipyard's power, they had a chance to defeat the Dominion and protect the future of the galaxy. And he was ready to take whatever came next. "Then let's find it," he said, determination in his voice. "Let's end this.